March 2026. Inside the high concrete walls of Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, Chris Watts wakes up to the same view he's had for over 7 years. A cramped cell, the hum of a maximum security wing, and the faces of the 3 people he murdered, Shannan, Bella, and Celeste, staring back at him from photos taped above his bunk. Most of the world has moved on from the 2018 horror in Frederick, Colorado. But inside these walls, a new and perhaps more disturbing story is unfolding. This isn't just about the crimes you already know. It's about the letters Watts is writing today, the women he's manipulating from his cell, and the chilling way he's now using religion to rewrite his own history. I'm Michelle, and this is a deep dive into the hidden life of America's most hated father 7 years later. Before we break down the verified documents and recent interviews that reveal his current mental state, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We spent 2 weeks vetting every detail of this script to ensure you get the facts, not just the headlines. To understand where Chris Watts is today, we have to look at the unprecedented way he ended up in Wisconsin. On November 19, 2018, Judge Marcelo Kopkow didn't just sentence Watts, he condemned the very nature of the crime, calling it the most inhumane and vicious case he had handled in nearly 2 decades on the bench. Watts was handed 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Usually a high-profile killer stays in the state where the crime occurred, but Colorado officials realized almost immediately that Watts was a walking target. The vitriol from the public was matched only by the rage of the general inmate population in Colorado. To prevent a localized riot or a targeted hit, the Colorado Department of Corrections invoked an interstate compact agreement. Under the cover of darkness on December 3, 2018, Watts was moved. By December 5th, he was processed into Dodge Correctional in Waupun, Wisconsin, a facility built in the mid-19th century designed to hold the state's most dangerous men. But here is the detail that surprises many. Watts is not in solitary confinement, despite the nature of his crimes. Killing children is the lowest rung on the prison social ladder. The Wisconsin Department of Corrections confirmed as recently as late 2024 that Watts remains in the general population. He walks the same tiers as Tier 1 offenders, eats in the same mess hall, and works a daily job. Forensic experts suggest this is a calculated survival move by Watts. In prison, child killers are often green-lighted for hits. To stay alive for 2,600 days, Watts has had to become a ghost. He doesn't join gangs, he doesn't pick fights. According to former cellmates like Dylan Tallman, who lived alongside Watts, the man is a master of keeping his head down. He maintains a quiet, almost robotic demeanor that masks the monster underneath. Tallman noted that Watts doesn't spend his time looking over his shoulder for an assassin. Instead, he spends his time looking for his next female target. Even in a cage, the patterns that led to the murder of Shannan and the girls, the need for external validation, and the pursuit of a new life are still very much active. The daily routine of Chris Watts in 2026 is a study in mundane, chilling reality. He wakes up between 5:30 and 6 a.m. for the morning count. Like every other inmate, he is a number. But his cell is a shrine to the life he chose to end. It has been verified through DOC records and multiple sources that Watts maintains photos of Shannan and his daughters in his immediate living space. In 2019, a massive public outcry and a petition with tens of thousands of signatures demanded these photos be removed, arguing that a murderer shouldn't be allowed to keep his victims. However, prison policy in Wisconsin allows for personal family photos as long as they don't depict contraband or gang activity. For Watts, these photos aren't a source of crushing guilt. According to psychologists who have studied his correspondence, they are tools for his narrative. He uses them to show visitors and pen pals that he is a grieving father, effectively cosplaying the role of the man he was supposed to be before the morning of August 13th. His work life is equally repetitive. Watts is currently employed as a prison custodian. He spends his days mopping floors and cleaning common areas for a wage that amounts to roughly 50 to 75 cents an hour. While most inmates use their meager earnings for extra food or hygiene products, Watts has a different priority: communication. Prison records and insider reports indicate that a significant portion of his commissary funds goes towards stamps and writing paper. He is a prolific writer, but he isn't writing a memoir or a confession. He is building a network. He currently has a rotation of women, some of whom have never met him, who send him money, sexy photos, and emotional support. This isn't just a hobby, it's a survival strategy. By surrounding himself with a digital harem of supporters, Watts maintains the illusion of being the nice guy he desperately wants the world to believe he is. He's essentially running the same play he ran with Nicole Kessinger, but this time the stakes are his own psychological comfort in a 6 by 9 foot room. The most disturbing development in the last 24 months is Watts's total immersion into what experts call religious weaponization. In letters obtained as recently as January 2026, Watts has begun comparing his situation to that of biblical figures, specifically Jesus Christ. In one letter to a pen pal named Deborah, Watts wrote that his imprisonment was God's will, just as it was God's will for Jesus to suffer. This isn't just a man finding faith. This is a man using faith to bypass accountability. By framing his crimes as a path he had to walk to find God, he effectively erases the agency he had when he put his hands around Shannan's neck. He frequently quotes 2 Corinthians, claiming he is a new creature and that old things have passed away. To Watts, the old things are the murders. He speaks about them in the third person as if they happened to someone else. This cognitive dissonance allows him to sleep at night. He has convinced a segment of his followers, mostly vulnerable women who believe they can fix him, that he was a victim of spiritual warfare or demonic influence. But when you look at the letters he sent to a different pen pal, Sherilyn Cattle, the holy man facade slips. In those writings, he admitted to things he never told the FBI, including the fact that he tried to smother the girls at home first, and when they woke up, he took them to the oil site to finish the job. He admitted to slipping Shannan OxyContin weeks before the murders to try and induce a miscarriage. These are the actions of a calculated, cold-blooded killer, not a man who was led astray by a temporary lapse in judgment. As we move into the next phase of this breakdown, we're going to look at the specific women he is blaming today and the emotional toll this is still taking on the families left behind. Let's look at the harlot narrative. In letters that surfaced in late 2025 and early 2026, Chris Watts has increasingly focused his resentment on the women he once claimed to love. He doesn't see himself as the aggressor. He sees himself as the prize that two women fought over until blood was spilled. He has specifically targeted Nicole Kessinger in his private correspondence, using biblical terminology to strip her of her humanity. He refers to her as a Jezebel and a harlot, claiming her flattering speech was a trap set by the devil to pull him away from his path of righteousness. This is a massive shift from his 2018 interviews with the FBI, where he protected her, lied for her, and seemed desperate to keep her name out of the mud. Now, safely tucked away in a cell where she can't confront him, he has turned her into the villain of his story. But it's not just the mistress. The most haunting part of Watts's current psychology is how he frames Shannan. In conversations with fellow inmates like Dylan Tallman, Watts has reportedly described Shannan as bossy and difficult, implying that her personality created the pressure cooker that led to the murders. This is the hallmark of a family annihilator, the devaluation phase. To justify killing her, he had to make her less than human in his mind. 7 years later, that devaluation has only hardened. He tells his pen pals that Shannan pushed him to the brink, as if the triple murder of a pregnant woman and 2 toddlers was a natural reaction to a stressful marriage. He isn't just lying to the world, he is lying to himself every single hour of every single day to avoid the crushing reality of what he is, a man who discarded his family like trash when they became an inconvenience. The women who write to him now are part of a bizarre ecosystem of true crime groupies and individuals suffering from hybristophilia, the clinical term for being attracted to those who commit high-profile atrocities. According to sources within the Dodge Correctional Facility, Watts receives more mail than almost any other inmate. Some of these women send him commissary deposits that allow him to live a relatively comfortable life by prison standards. They send him books on theology, which he then uses to further refine his redeemed sinner persona. One woman, who went by the pseudonym Anna, in a 2024 report, claimed she spent over $2,000 on Watts's phone calls and stamps because she believed he was misunderstood and pushed into a corner by a controlling wife. This is exactly what Watts wants. He is a covert narcissist who thrives on being seen as the good guy. In prison, he has found a way to curate a fan base that only sees the version of him he wants to project. He doesn't have to deal with the screaming of children or the financial stress of a mortgage. He only has to deal with the adoring letters of strangers who see him as a tragic, handsome figure caught in a bad situation. Forensic psychologists warn that this validation is dangerous. It prevents any semblance of true rehabilitation. As long as there is a woman on the outside telling him he's a man of God, Chris Watts will never have to face the cold, hard truth of the shallow grave at CRV 319. He is essentially using these women as psychological shields to protect his ego from the reality of his own depravity. Now we have to talk about the emotional anchor of this story. The families left in the wake of Chris's choices. While Chris sits in Wisconsin playing the role of a martyr, the Rutzek family in North Carolina is living a permanent life sentence. Frank and Sandy Rutzek, Shannan's parents, didn't just lose a daughter, they lost their entire legacy. They lost the chance to see Bella start middle school. They lost the chance to see Celeste's first dance recital. They lost Nico, the grandson they never got to hold. In a rare public statement in 2025, Frank Rutzek described the pain as a hole that never closes. Every time a new letter from Chris Watts leaks, or a new supporter makes a YouTube video defending him, the wound is ripped open again. The contrast is staggering. Chris Watts spends his time debating scripture and managing his pen pals. Meanwhile, the Rutzeks spend their time maintaining a memorial for their murdered children. They have had to endure online harassment from Watts defenders, who claim Shannan was the real killer, a lie Chris himself started in his first confession. The personal cost to this family is immeasurable. They didn't just lose their loved ones, they lost their privacy, their peace, and their sense of safety in the world. When Chris Watts writes about his suffering in prison, he ignores the fact that he created a vacuum of grief that has swallowed an entire extended family. He isn't the one suffering, he is the one who caused it. And his refusal to simply be quiet and serve his time is a secondary assault on the people he hurt the most. The question of Watts' own family, the Watts side, is more complicated. In the beginning, Cindy and Ronnie Watts were his fiercest defenders. They famously gave interviews suggesting Shannan was unstable and that Chris was a victim of her dominance. They stood by him through the sentencing, visiting him and providing the only familial support he had. But as the years have dragged on, that bond has reportedly frayed. Sources close to the family suggest that the weight of the evidence, specifically the letters where Chris admitted to the premeditated nature of the crimes, has become too much even for them to ignore. His sister Jamie has largely vanished from the public eye, distancing herself from the brother who became a global symbol of evil. Being the family of a family annihilator is its own kind of prison. The Watts family has to live with the knowledge that the good boy they raised was capable of stuffing his own daughters into oil tanks. In March 2026, the silence from the Watts camp is deafening. They no longer provide the public defenses they once did. They are a family broken by the same hand that broke the Rutzek. Even if they still love him in some capacity, the hero narrative Chris tried to sell them has been thoroughly dismantled by his own changing confessions. He is a man alone. Even when he's surrounded by the ghost-written adulation of his pen pals, he has no real roots left, only the transactional relationships he can maintain through a prison glass partition or a 25-cent stamp. The psychological landscape of Chris Watts in 2026 is what experts call a closed loop. He is living in a reality where the murders are a distant, blurred event, a mistake or a tragedy that happened to him rather than something he actively executed. Dr. Lena Derhally, who has studied Watts' profile extensively, notes that this is the ultimate defense mechanism of a covert narcissist. If he were to truly accept the weight of what he did, the feeling of his wife's life leaving her body, the terror in his daughter's eyes in their final moments, his ego would shatter. To survive mentally, he has to believe he is a good person who did a bad thing. This is why the Jesus comparisons are so vital to his daily existence. He isn't just seeking forgiveness, he is seeking a complete identity reset. But the facts of August 13th, 2018 are stubborn. They don't reset. Forensic evidence showed that Shannan didn't fight back, likely because she was exhausted, pregnant, and blindsided by the man she trusted. The autopsies of Bella and Celeste revealed defensive wounds on Bella's tongue, evidence that she fought for her life while her father held a blanket over her face. In March 2026, those forensic truths remain unchanged, even as Watts tries to paint over them with scripture. When he tells a pen pal that God has a plan for me in here, he is essentially saying that the deaths of his family were merely a catalyst for his own spiritual journey. It is perhaps the most offensive form of narcissism imaginable, the idea that 4 lives were extinguished just so Chris Watts could find a Bible in a Wisconsin prison. The environment at Dodge Correctional is not a vacuum. While Watts plays the role of the humble servant, the staff and other inmates see the reality. A 2024 report from a former correctional officer at the facility described Watts as compliant but eerie. He follows every rule to the letter, not out of respect for authority, but because he is terrified of losing his privileges, his phone time, his mail, his ability to communicate with the outside world. If he gets into a fight or catches a disciplinary ticket, his lifeline to his fans is cut off. This compliance is often mistaken for remorse by those who don't know his history, but to the guards who watch him every day, it looks more like a performance. He is a man who is on whenever anyone is looking. There is also the matter of his safety. Even in 2026, 7 years after the fact, the threat of violence is a shadow that follows him. New inmates arrive at Dodge every week, and many of them come in with a hero complex of their own, the desire to be the one who finally takes out the man who killed his kids. Watts knows this. It's why he spends his recreation time in specific areas, why he keeps his head down in the cafeteria, and why he has cultivated relationships with a few protectors within the prison hierarchy. He uses the same manipulation tactics on influential inmates that he uses on women. He offers them favors, listens to their problems, and positions himself as a harmless, helpful guy who is just trying to get through the day. He has turned survival into a full-time job. Let's talk about the new details that have emerged regarding his finances. While Watts earns less than $1 an hour cleaning floors, his commissary account is often flush with cash. This money comes from donations from his network of supporters. In 2025, an investigation into prison banking records suggested that some of these women are essentially acting as his personal assistants on the outside. They manage his image on social media forums, they send him high-end sneakers and clothes allowed within DOC regulations, and they provide him with the luxury of choice in a place where choice is a rare commodity. He can buy name-brand snacks, better stationery, and extra phone minutes. This financial support is a crucial part of his power dynamic. In prison, money is status. Even though he is at the bottom of the social ladder due to his crime, his access to funds allows him to buy protection or friendship through the barter of commissary goods. It's a bitter irony. The man who claimed financial stress was a primary reason for the breakdown of his marriage is now living on the charity of strangers who think he's a victim of circumstance. He has replaced a wife who worked hard to provide for her family with a faceless crowd of donors who ask for nothing in return but a handwritten letter signed with a heart. It is a perfect, consequence-free existence for a man who never wanted the responsibility of a real family. The impact on the Frederick, Colorado community where this all began is still palpable. The house on Saratoga Trail, the site of the murders, was finally sold after years of sitting vacant, a grim landmark that nobody wanted to touch. For the neighbors who saw Chris loading his truck that morning, the trauma hasn't faded. They remember the normal guy who mowed his lawn and played with his kids. The realization that a monster can look like a suburban dad is a scar on that neighborhood that will never fully heal. In 2026, the case is still used in police training seminars across the country as a primary example of the danger of the domestic narcissist. Chris Watts didn't just kill his family, he killed the idea of the safe suburb. He proved that you can live next door to a man for years, watch him play with his daughters, and have no idea that he is capable of unimaginable cruelty. As he sits in his cell today, writing about forgiveness and new beginnings, the people of Frederick remember the search parties, the candles, and the absolute betrayal of a father's duty. They don't see a new creature in Christ. They see the man who lied to their faces on the news while his family lay in crude oil. The passage of time has not brought closure to the community. It has only brought a deeper understanding of how deep the deception really went. The psychological concept of cognitive bypassing is perhaps the best way to describe Chris Watts in March 2026. This is a man who has managed to bypass the guilt of his actions by leaping straight into a self-styled divinity. When he sits in his cell and writes to his spiritual sisters, he isn't discussing the mechanics of the murders or the physiological reality of what he did. He is discussing grace. To the outside world, this looks like a sickening avoidance of the truth. To Watts, it is his only way to exist. If he were to truly sit with the image of 4-year-old Bella's final struggle, the psychological weight would likely lead to a total breakdown. Instead, he has built a mental fortress made of Bible verses and the soft-focus adoration of strangers who didn't know the man he was in Colorado. And there is the chilling detail of his legacy. Watts has reportedly expressed concern about how he will be remembered, not as a killer, but as a servant of God who fell. In late 2025, sources indicated he was attempting to collaborate on a book through one of his intermediaries, a testimony of his life. This is the ultimate move of a narcissist trying to profit, if not financially, then reputationally, from the deaths of his wife and children. He wants to turn the CER 319 oil site into a Golgotha, a place of sacrifice that led to his rebirth. It is a level of delusion that forensic investigators say is rare, even among the most hardened lifers. Most men who kill their kids eventually break under the weight of the social isolation. Watts has leaned into it, creating a digital congregation that replaces the family he discarded. As we wrap up this look into the hidden life of Chris Watts 7 years later, the reality is clear. The man in Dodge Correctional is the same man who lived on Saratoga Trail. He is still a man who needs an audience. He is still a man who defines himself through the eyes of the women he manipulates. He is still a man who cannot take a single ounce of genuine, unvarnished accountability. While the world remembers the victims, Shannan, the vibrant mother, Bella, the protective big sister, Celeste, the energetic toddler, and Nico, the son who never took a breath, Chris Watts is busy trying to make the world remember him as a tragic hero in a story of redemption. But we know the truth. The truth is found in the court transcripts, the autopsy reports, and the silence of a house that should have been filled with laughter. Chris Watts is not a martyr, and he is not a new creature. He is a man who made a choice to trade his family for a fresh start, and now he is living with the only version of a fresh start the state of Wisconsin allows, a life behind bars, where the only people who love him are those who don't know him at all. He will wake up tomorrow, and the day after that for the next 30 or 40 years, and he will look at those photos on his wall. Whether he sees his victims or his props for a fake life, the result is the same. He is exactly where he belongs. Thank you for spending this time with me on this deep dive. This video took a massive amount of research to ensure we stayed away from the rumors and stuck to the documented reality of Watts's life today. If you feel that this kind of fact-based reporting is important, please share this video. It helps us fight the sensationalism that often surrounds these cases. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the Mitchell Report so you don't miss our next investigation. Your support allows us to keep digging for the truth. I'm Michelle. This is the Michelle Report. Thank you for watching,